Now, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can see the screen near Annapurna Basecamp. Now it's better.
Yes,
The
yes,
PowerPoint.
sir. We can see the
That's all
PowerPoint.
good. Hey, excellent.
Hey, good. You don't
Wonderful.
have. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so yes. So you have another screen.
Yeah, I've got two screens separate from.
Good. You are a retired professor. Good. Just joking.
So we
Anyway,
could formally begin now. Good
yes,
morning,
so please.
everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. On behalf of the UNESCO Chair in Teacher Education at Kathmandu University School of Education, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second session of our webinar series. My name is Anushma Kadir, and I will be moderating today's program. This is the second in a series of webinars hosted by UNESCO Chair in Teacher Education. Through these sessions, we hope to bring together scholars, educators, and practitioners from across the globe to engage in a meaningful conversations that shape the future of teaching, learning, and higher education more broadly. Today's session comes at a very particularly important moment. Higher education, as many of you know, has long been a contested space, and in recent years, it has faced mounting challenges. Amid the uncertainty, it becomes ever more important to pause and ask, what might a more just, empowered, and equitable future for higher education look like? To help us explore this question, we are honored to have with us today Professor Dr. Peter Charles Taylor, whose 4 decades academic career spans universities in Australia, the UK, and the US, including 3 decades at Curtin University's Science and Mathematics Education Center. Professor Taylor brings with him a wealth of experience in transformative education, research, having supervised 47 doctoral and 7 full theses to completion, and many of them from Nepal and across Asia Pacific and beyond. As director of the International Transformative Education Research Network, Professor Taylor serves as an education consultant with a focus on cultural and environmental sustainability. Professor Taylor will be speaking to us on educating for sustainable development, transforming STEM research teachers into global change agents, offering us a vision of possibilities lie ahead for higher education. Before we begin, let me briefly walk you through today's program. We'll start with a short reflection from the Dean of Kathmandu University School of Education and Chair of UNESCO Chair in Teacher Education, followed by our keynote address by Professor Taylor. And we will close with an open question answer session where you will have the opportunity to engage directly with our speaker. So I'm going to request, proceed with the program. May I now again invite Dean of Kathmandu University School of Education and Chair of UNESCO Chair in Teacher Education to share his reflection on the UNESCO Chair and to introduce our keynote speaker as you're deeply connected with Professor Taylor. Over to you, Dean, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Singing and dancing going on in my neighborhood, so there might be some echo early morning. Probably it's prayer. Good morning, everyone. Briefly speaking, I was talking to Professor Taylor earlier that the UNESCO chair this is the oldest UNESCO chair in the region, established in 1996 and went through several trials and tribulations, and sometime it became very active, sometime it is not. It has not been, and now it is very, very active since 2022. Myself and my colleague, Dr. Rewat Dhakal, look after as chairs and chair and co-chair, and our main focus currently is on climate change education, particularly education 4.0, among other sustainable development goals. This is the mandate given to its chairs and unitary networks across the world by UNESCO. This series, we started this series last week and we continue to do so. every 2 weeks, and provided that we find the the presenter, webinar presenter. So today, Professor Peter Taylor, I have been working with him since 2002-3, I suppose. I saw him briefly in 2002, particularly since 2003, I suppose. So it's been, you can count how many years, and we have been working together. And Professor Taylor brings unique perspective as a science educator, science and math educator, or I would say STEM educator, then bringing A within STEM, and also working in the field of transformative learning, particularly from the perspective of I would call it Australasia, and also partly connecting with international students, international communities, mostly Asia and also Africa, and also other parts of the world. So we have published few papers, I suppose, and we are planning to bring them together. Hopefully, when I retire, we'll be able to do so. So we are planning to do so. Planning to publish some more papers on, consolidated probably a book and some recent ideas on transformative learning, STEM education, and so on and so forth. So the series is actually about higher education. So last week I shared how higher education is at crossroad. So 15 days back I shared a webinar, and today Professor Taylor is talking about this, exactly the theme that UNESCO chair brings forth, that is education for sustainable development. And as Anusma already introduced, so I think more introduction is not needed. We have a TRAST conference coming up in October, and Professor Taylor is one of the keynote speakers, is the founder of this ITERN community. So with this, over to you, Anusmaji. So how coherent I was, I don't know, but I tried to say something.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we move on. I would like to request all of you being a part of this webinar series to click on the emoticons to welcome Peter Charles Taylor with a round of applause. So let's use that emoticon, and I would like to welcome Peter Charles Taylor for his address today on educating for sustainable development. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Anusma. It's a great honour and privilege to be here today, speaking with a very interested and engaged community in Nepal and beyond Nepal, I believe, as well. So I'm going to talk to you today about educating for sustainable development, transformative STEAM teachers as global change agents. And the term STEAM is relatively new globally. STEM is well known, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as a cluster of disciplines that have a strong relationship with each other. But the A is an innovation, and it serves a very, very important purpose to engage the STEM teachers in all sorts of transformative learning experiences that they can pass on to their students. So I'm going to talk to you today about some of the content in these two books. First one is Researchers' Transformative Learning for Sustainable Futures, Global Voices and Visions. And that has been co-edited with my good colleague here, the Dean, Dr. Balchandra Luitel. And that book focuses on how professional educators can engage in postgraduate studies to become transformative learners with the goal of promoting education for sustainable development. The second book following that, Transformative STEAM Education for Sustainable Development, which will be mostly my focus today, International Perspectives and Practices. Now, this book has been co-edited with my good wife, Elizabeth Lilly Taylor. And what we've done here is to present a collection of practical activities that teachers engage in when they engage their own students in transformative learning practices, with the goal of helping them to become agents of sustainable development. So There's a lot there. There's many decades worth of information in these books. I certainly cannot cover all of that today, but I'll give you a little sample. So we'll start off with STEM, which is well known in Australia and worldwide: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it has a huge impact globally. You can see some of the products and outcomes of STEM practices that have made a major contribution to our societies and are continuing to do so. There's an exponential growth curve in this area now that artificial intelligence has come to join the party. However, all is not bright and cheerful, because the products, the tools that we've developed have had somewhat of a negative impact on the world at large. And we've now entered what's called the Anthropocene era. So prior to this, for 12,000 years, we were engaged in the Holocene era. That's something that you guys can look up. The Anthropocene era is an era where our humanity is having a huge impact on the planet, and that shows up with this image of the human footprint stamping very heavily on the globe, and on the right hand side a few images of our impact. Now, I like to use images a lot because, and as I'll explain to you later, the arts provide us with many new methods for developing our understanding and engagement with transformative learning. It's an emotional experience as much as it is a knowledgeable experience. So we have here the human footprint on the global environment has now become so large and active that it rivals some of the great forces of nature in its impact on the functioning of the Earth system. A lot of our natural systems that regulate the planet are now being hijacked, being damaged by the way in which we use our STEM products and tools to enhance our lifestyles. So we have at least 4 global sustainability crises that we really need to be addressing. Climate change, obviously, is the first big one. Second one is plastic pollution of the rivers and oceans. Third one is loss of biodiversity. And the fourth one is cultural diversity loss. Of those 4, it's very, very difficult for young children to see the evidence of this. We can read about it in the newspapers and on television and so on, but to actually see the impact of these crises on the Earth, particularly our local communities, it's very, very difficult. But the one that's most evident to everybody is the prevalence of plastic pollution. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about that. Or do. AI, artificial intelligence, that's now looming. It's come over the horizon and it's much closer to us, and it's almost a daily event in global newspapers. What is the benefits of, and what are the potential global crises of artificial intelligence? Now, I won't get into that today, but that's certainly a very, very important issue that's arisen in the last few years. So the plastic pollution crisis, the World Economic Forum report states that each year at least 8 million tons of plastics leak into the ocean, which is the equivalent to that image there, the dumping of the contents of one garbage truck every 60 seconds. Can you imagine that? Every 60 seconds, we have the equivalent of that garbage truck dropping plastic waste into a waterway, which flows down into the ocean. So the ocean is expected to contain 1 ton of plastic for every 3 tons of fish. By when? By last year. And by 2050, more plastics than fish by weight. And the impact on the wildlife is horrendous. And we're now learning that we are also ingesting microplastic particles in our foods. So this really is a crisis that needs to be addressed because of the health of the natural environment and the health of us. So there's again an arts-based image just to sort of drive the point home, to make us feel something, not just to know something, but to feel and to question our values. This is an example of the biodiversity crisis loss, and it's invisible to most people, and that's why it continues to be a problem. A few years ago, the range of this beautiful orangutan and its family and its community, the forest, in other words, has been reduced to 2.5% of what it was originally. And so with a lack of habitat, the loss of habitat due to deforestation, agriculture, illegal logging, this has become one of the most threatened of the great apes worldwide. Now, this loss of biodiversity, it's not obvious to us every day, unless we live in a forest, and most of us don't. So one of the big challenges of education for sustainable development is to bring these kind of crises into people's consciousness. Okay, we have evolved from basic life forms in the ocean over thousands and thousands of years into somebody up here who's well dressed. However, I question this. Are we, the humans, the apex predator of the biosphere? Okay, so that's the glum, depressing story. Let's lighten ourselves up with some optimism and a sense of hope that the future can be better than what it is at the moment. So here we have the Living Planet report, published just a couple of years ago, and a little extract from it. We need an inclusive whole of society approach that empowers each of us individuals to act, to recognize the plurality of values. Now here we go with values, not just knowledge. We don't need just know-how, but we also need values in order to put our knowledge into practice. So values and knowledge systems that can put us on a more sustainable pathway and ensures that the costs and benefits from our actions are socially just and equitably shared. So I'm going to be talking increasingly about the importance of bringing our values into the foreground as educators as we engage with our students. The United Nations Development Programme, here's Professor Gus Speth, who was very influential a few years ago, and he's published a couple of books here, way back in 2006, 2008, and a quote from him: "The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation, a new consciousness." This goes way beyond just know-how. The United Nations report, Transforming Our World 10 years ago, promotes these three principles. We need to take account of the well-being of humanity and the planet. So I'll just repeat that: the well-being of not just humanity, but of the planet itself. We need an intergenerational commitment. That is, we need to focus on our children and their children into the future. We don't just live on the planet for our own immediate gratification and survival, but we live on the planet in order to produce the next generations who are going to join us in this endeavor of sustainable development. And this requires a moral imperative, or a set of ethical values which are engaged and embedded in these sustainable development goals. The OECD, a future of education and skills by 2030, which is coming up. Students have the capacity to take responsibility for their actions, to have a strong moral compass, again values, that allows for considered reflection, working with others, and respecting the planet. So this is one of the great goals here, learning outcomes of education for sustainable development from the OECD report. It's a good report, it's worth reading. It's got some nice imagery. And I love imagery because imagery is so powerful in conveying ideas and concepts. Now, I said before that we moved from the Holocene into the Anthropocene. What's the next era that we would hope to move into? So Professor Glenn Albrecht has defined this term, the Symbiocene vision. And the Symbiocene, it's a new geological era characterized by harmonious interactions between humans and all other living things. He's set out some principles for this. First one is mutuality, about living together for mutual benefit rather than competitive benefit. Ecology, recognizing the interconnectedness of all living things, and that goes beyond us humans into everything that's living on the planet, the animals and the plants, etc. Ethics, an ethics of natural justice, where we focus on the value of cooperation rather than conflict. And the last one there, biophilia, the love of life and lifelike forms. It's not enough to know that we need to do things to improve and to rescue, but we also need to be driven by our emotions. And love is a very strong emotion that would drive young children forward in participating in sustainable development activities. We can never start too young in developing young children's connection with and love of the natural world. So there's a professional challenge for all of us, particularly for STEM educators. How can we, STEM educators, transform what I call the standard model of teaching and learning to engage our students in ethical valuing for sustainable development? So what is this standard model? Well, I'm sure everybody has had an experience of this. I certainly did. My secondary school education, and particularly my first degree at university, is represented by this image. You would go into the classroom, you would sit down, and you wouldn't say a word, but the lecturer would have the overriding voice presenting his knowledge about the world outside. And this was done with a really strong sense of objectivity. So we would learn about the objects, the systems, and the patterns of the world outside of the school, outside of the classroom. Sit there and copy everything down. The lecturers, the teachers used to use chalk and blackboards, then they moved on to overhead projectors, but the pedagogy remained the same, a one-way transmission of knowledge. Values were never really a focal point, apart from the importance of burying subjectivity and focusing on objectivity. So that is pretty much a summary of the standard model of education. And I'm sure most people here today have had that experience. You'll learn a lot of objective facts and equations and practical skills in the laboratory, but you don't learn anything about yourself, really. So what about the inner worlds of the students? Should they not be taken into account? And if we're talking about a transformative learning pedagogy, the answer is absolutely yes. A transformative model of education has a focus on students' subjectivities and on developing their objective knowledge and skills. And I use this image of the Roman god Janus, who we've named the first month of the year after January, because this god-like figure represents a transition period, looking both ways between the outer world and students' inner worlds. And by subjectivity, I mean focusing on students' learning experiences, their sense of connectedness, their ethical values, aesthetics, the sense of beauty, particularly about the natural world, and their creativity. So the challenge is, how do we do that? And we draw on this concept of transformative learning. Again, an image, just dwell on that image for a moment. Ask yourself what that really means. Why is it evocative? And then these two images also. Seeing the world anew, learning to come out and look beyond the framework of our existing understandings, and recognizing that we are constrained pretty much by our initial education, particularly if it's the standard model, and we need to be able to break through and reconceptualize, and that's what the next couple of slides will help us to understand. So transformative learning, transformative education draws on a whole range of scholars, their work all the way through the 21st century, the 20th century, I should say, into the 21st century. And I'm sure many of you today will look at these, some of these will look very familiar to you. One of the things that I think we are doing at the moment, thanks very much to the leadership of the Dean, Professor Balchandra Luitel, is to say, well, what about the Eastern scholarly wisdom traditions? Do we have figures from that tradition that can come in here and join with these scholars from the Western wisdom traditions? And there's plenty of this developmental work going on at Kathmandu University School of Education, where Eastern wisdom traditions are being analysed and brought into the foreground in a scholarly way. So this diagram, in the very near future, I think will have some imagery of Eastern wisdom tradition leaders. So from that work, what we've done here is to distill 5 particular transformative learning capabilities that we would like to see our students develop. First one is cultural. I'm going to go into each one of these in a bit more depth in the moment. This is just a quick overview. Cultural self-knowing, relational knowing, critical social knowing, with the finger pointing out and also backwards at us, ourselves, visionary ethical valuing, and practical knowing. So let me quickly dip into each one of those in turn. Cultural self-knowing or self-reflection. Look at the images first before I explain. So what we're talking about here is helping our students to understand their cultural embeddedness, the values and feelings and ideas that they've grown up with, perhaps within the standard model of education. And here they're learning about their habits of mind and their values and beliefs. And I particularly like the imagery down here, the image at the bottom left, where you take out your ideas and you examine them. Relational knowing, again, look at the images. Nature is not a static object, it's dynamic. It's interconnected with other aspects of nature. Underground, we've got the microcelia networks that are invisible to us. Above ground, we've got these beautiful examples of the natural world growing dynamically. So it just emphasizes that it's alive. So what we're talking about, relational knowing, is helping our students to learn to connect empathically, lovingly, and spiritually with the natural world, and most importantly as well, culturally different others. And you might be saying, how do we do this? Well, we're moving in that direction. Critical social knowing or critical social reflection. Again, look at the images. What is there to be critical about? So here we want to help our students to reflect critically on how history, their own personal history and social history, has framed and in many ways distorted our relationship with the natural world and with culturally different others. Plastic pollution is clearly evidence of the distortion of our relationship with the natural world. And then we can extend that into the politics and climate change. And then this image here is about pointing the finger outwards at the cause of all these problems, but also recognizes that those 3 fingers point back at us as individuals, because we have to ask ourselves, how culpable are we in helping to promote things like plastic pollution, for example, or power relationships across ethnic borders. Visionary and ethical valuing. Again, look at the images. So this transformative learning capability that we would like our students to develop is about helping them to imagine the future. In the first instance, what could a better world be like? That's an act of imagination. And secondly, what should a better world be like? And the word should is about moral values and ethical values, helping them to develop those values in order to be committed as agents of change. And lastly, practical knowing. So this is not just a classroom activity that we're engaging in with our students. So look at the images. So this is about helping our students to develop themselves as agents, moral agents of change, about committing to action and asking themselves, how can I help to make the world a better place? That should, from the previous slide. And what actions can I take at home and in my community? So it's about going outside of the classroom and helping to make the world a better place. So those are the 5 transformative learning capabilities that we want to help our students, particularly in the STEM education area, to develop. So here we have the traditional standard model, and here we have the transformative learning model that comes in and joins. And the question then is, how do we do this? How do teachers develop a pedagogy for engaging students in not just the traditional view of disciplinary knowledge in STEM, but also in developing their transformative learning capabilities? So this is where the arts, the A, that turns STEM into STEAM, is essential. But by the arts, the liberal arts, we mean the social sciences, creative arts and humanities. So we're talking about interdisciplinary curricula here. And what the liberal arts help us to engage our students in is acts of creativity through imagination and inspiration, to develop a sense of aesthetics. We're talking about loving nature, so a sense of beauty and spirituality. Rhetoric, that is the ability to express and persuade others that change is important and necessary. And particularly ethics, the ethics of eco-justice and social justice. So the arts are a very rich source of methods for engaging students and developing their transformative learning capabilities. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how teachers have done this. Just before that, consider the image here. And this one, which will appeal to early childhood educators. So we're talking here about combining the arts with STEM to create a STEAM perspective on pedagogy and on curricula and on assessment. So as I said earlier, this book, Transformative STEAM Education for Sustainable Development, I'm just quickly letting you know that there are 2 free chapters to download. Chapter 1, which gives the rationale, and then Chapter 4 is an excellent example of how a transformative teacher engages in education for sustainability, moving from STEM to STEAM. So go to the publisher's website, that's Brill, B-R-I-L-L, and that's available for everybody to download for free. So an example of teachers going through the transformative learning process themselves and then taking that into their pedagogy and engaging their students in education for sustainable development. Here's Dr. Piang Manilam. She's a chemistry teacher. She's more than that these days. She works at what's called the lab school. That's the school connected to the university, Konkan University. And here's a lovely photograph of the outside environment. That's the statue of Buddha there. And her PhD supervisor, I was part of that theme, but her primary supervisor was Dr. Chokchai Yuanyong from inside the Science Education Department. He's head of Science Education. So chapter 15 in the book is called Ethical Dilemma of Plastics. Piang is a chemistry teacher. She values sustainable development of the natural environment and of Thai culture. Her PhD research focused on developing students' chemistry knowledge and skills and their transformative learning capabilities for sustainable development. How did she do that? She wrote what we call an ethical dilemma story about a Thai family's use of plastic shopping bags. So drawing on the arts, she wrote a story about a family and inside that family, there was some dispute between the father and the eldest daughter about the importance or lack of importance of plastic shopping bags. So the students, Piang got her students to work their way through that story with a series of questions that they needed to answer by themselves and in small groups to try to work out what's the best path forward, the practical path forward of going to a supermarket, coming home with all your stuff in a plastic bag versus an alternative. What could that be? So she integrated the story into her teaching of polymers in the chemistry curriculum. And then she engaged the students in the practice of developing biodegradable plastics from cassava, which is a vegetable that's readily available in the local environment. PBL is project-based learning. So these images just show you a little bit about the Thai culture. Once a year there's a festival and they float offerings down the river. And what's happened in recent decades is that the rivers have got offerings of plastic pollution. And this is something that she wanted to address in her transformative teaching practice. And here are the students engaging in developing the cassava, which is a biodegradable form of plastic. Two teachers in Perth, Australia. One of them is the head of maths, the other one is the head of English. They were committed also to engaging their students in transformative learning for sustainable development. And they used for their teaching practice, they co-taught in the same classroom. So it's interdisciplinary mathematics and English language, English literacy. This book is called Window on the Environment. There's about 20 pages. Each page has a different view of the same environment. Page 1 is a lady with a baby looking out the window, seeing the natural world unpolluted in its natural state. 20 pages later, she looks out of the same window and sees this housing development and the lack of natural animals and natural flora and fauna. So Ray and Tim co-taught this Year 9 Advanced Maths class. Their focus was again on the ethical dilemma thinking about the destruction of nature versus sustainable development. They used this picture book. There was no words, there was no mathematical formulae, there was no obvious mathematics. Students analysed the pictures mathematically. They would, over the 20 images, they would count the number of houses, the number of introduced animals, and estimate the population growth and plot it out using graphs such as these and looking with their calculators to establish what sort of mathematical relationship there might be between the number of houses and the age of the participants and so on. And they did that mathematically on their calculators. They also evaluated the author of the book, the narrative logic. Was this reusable? Was it realistic? Was it the developmental process? How did it have credibility? So at the end of the day, the students not only had their mathematical learning outcomes, but they wrote critical, reflective, narrative reports on their learning experience. And this was where the head of English, Tim Manea, came into the foreground to help them to write. Firstly, to examine the narrative logic of the author of the book, and secondly, how to write narratively about their personal learning experiences. And in doing so, we use the word I. I learned, I felt, I did, and they got to, that helps with developing the critical reflective learning capability. Sorry, my voice is just going at the moment. I'm nearing the end here. So we have the Earth Charter. You'll find that on the internet, earthcharter.org. And just a couple of little extracts that I think are worth reflecting on today. The choice is ours. Form a global partnership to care for Earth and one another, or risk the destruction of ourselves and the diversity of life. So we have a choice. Fundamental changes are needed in our values, in our institutions, and I would say particularly our educational institutions, and ways of living. We must realise that when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more, not just having more. We are more than consumers. We should be higher level development beings with a higher level consciousness. Look at the imagery and the poetic account. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. And so, you know, students might say, well, it's just me, what can I do? But if all the students were to develop transformative learning capabilities and a moral imperative commitment to sustainable development, then we have a synergy, and no longer is it about isolated individuals, but it's about a global community, all moving in the same direction. Thank you. I'll leave it there for you. Hand it back to the chair, Anushma.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor Taylor, for your profound reflections on the existing environmental and climate crisis and its implications for sustainable education. It was truly enlightening to gain a closer understanding of the deep-rooted realities of the global environmental crisis and of the potential we hold to transform the system through an inclusive, whole of society approach grounded in intergenerational commitment. Love is the common language of young children, and so it remains for adults. By tapping into this beautiful emotion, we can transform the education system by integrating values that raise learners to create a sustainable world for the future with cultural self-knowing, relational knowing, critical social knowing, visionary ethical valuing, and practical knowing at the center of this transformative approach. It has been deeply enlightening to be a part of this session. Personally, I feel very reflected upon and transformed itself. Now I would like to open the floor for a question and answer session, which will last for 15 minutes.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Anushma. Thank you.
You are welcome to raise your hand to ask a question, or alternatively, you may type your questions in the chat box and we will read them out on your behalf. Beginning with
thank you. Yeah, there are questions, I think. Let me read out to help Peter. So just my first question, I think I asked one question. How to promote biophilia in school education? There are ways, because we are also, rewriting national curriculum framework right now. So I'm the coordinator of that team. So can you suggest some ways as to how we can promote biophilia among school students from early grades till grade 12?
Okay, thanks for the question, Bal. Biophilia. So philia is the Greek for love, and bio is about biology, about the natural world. So how do we engage our students in developing that love? We don't do it by lecturing them in the standard model, where we just give them objective knowledge. We tell them you should love the world around you, particularly natural. I mean, that's one part of it, but it has to go way beyond that. We have to immerse the kids in the natural environment. We have to take them out of the classroom and give them an engagement, a feeling. It's a holistic engagement. I personally have loved doing that for my entire life. I feel like a different person, connected to the natural world when I'm out in the forest, for example, or if I'm up in the mountains in Nepal. What a wonderful environment you have there. I mean, there are so many opportunities to engage students in the natural beauty of Nepal. So we have to engage our students educationally outside of the classroom, and that depends on what resources are available to teachers and time commitment, etc. But continuing to deliver the message that it's important objectively, but then engaging the students, and then when they come back from that experience, talking to them about their feelings and providing them with learning experiences such as ethical dilemmas. You know, what happens if climate change alters the glaciers in the mountains? What happens to the animals that live in the forests if the forests are cut down for economic purposes? How do we deal with that conflict of interest between economics and sustainability? So ethical dilemma teaching is a really strong part of the sustainable education, sustainable development, teaching and learning. And we need to go beyond just thinking about doing it as a teacher, but embedding it in our curricula, because once it's in the curricula, then it has a force. And we also need to engage and develop assessment methods that value helping students to develop those learning capabilities. There's a saying that the assessment tail wags the curriculum dog.
Mm-hmm.
And so we might make all the changes we like in the curriculum, but if the assessment system is still valuing objective knowledge, that will win the day.
Thank you, Peter. So let me, continue the dialogue. So this second question here from our colleague Chetnath Panta, he asked this, Professor Taylor, I'm keen to hear your thoughts and perspectives on how spirituality helps to nurture and cultivate a transformative mindset. So spirituality, how spirituality is connected here. In terms of promoting transformative mindset in connection to, promoting sustainable education for sustainable development. I think this is the question.
Okay. The example that I showed you about Dr. Piang from Thailand is I think worth revisiting just for the moment. She had a sense of the spirituality of the tradition in Thailand, which is not that different from Nepal, Hinduism and Buddhism in a way. She was looking at, in particular, one of the ceremonies, annual ceremonies, which is a religious spiritual ceremony of floating offerings, little candles in organic material, floating it down the river. That's part of their integral part of their religious practice. Now, she wanted to see that continue, and she's a chemistry teacher, so how in the world do you do that in her classroom? So she focused on her teaching of plastics, polymers, and drew the students' attention through imagery and videos, and even walking down to the local river to see the presence of plastic pollution. And how is that related to the traditional practice of once a year floating offerings down the river, which is part of the spiritual development? So she was able to engage her students in an ethical dilemma thinking about, are we destroying our spirituality by consuming plastics and throwing the waste products in the river? And is that's convenient, and it's easy to do, because everything we go to shops and we buy plastic, everything's in plastics. And do we have good garbage disposal systems that engage in recycling, or do we just throw the plastic waste anywhere it's convenient? And not just Piang did this in her PhD, but some of the students in Indonesia also. And when you're doing your PhD, you can do it by engaging in transformative learning activities that help you to become a transformative learner yourself. So, yeah, there are very the book that I was showing you before on STEAM education has got a series of examples of how we might answer your question.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Another question, I think the spirituality, I think the nature, river, water, land, air, I think land-based pedagogy is quite popular these days, particularly in the context where indigenous communities reside or they bring forth these practices. I think water is also very important as you talk about the ceremony that has to worship river and make a river clean and keep river clean. I think this is something very good example from Piang, and the chapter is there in the book. I think it's available from the website, I think Breel.com. If you go there, you may find that chapter as well. Thank you. Next question from our ECD MPhil in Early Childhood Development student, Kumala Silwal. Does moral connection for transformative learning mean connecting skills and technology with humanity and global peace, including entire nature? So this is the question. So let me, did you get it?
No, could you please say that again? Because I was reading in the chat. I was reading a different section.
Does moral connection for transformative learning mean connecting skills and tech, means technology, with humanity and global peace, including entire nature?
Okay, yeah, good question. Complex too.
Yes.
I have in another presentation some slides on the role of artificial intelligence, that's the technology, latest technology, in helping us with our lives and our occupations and so on. But also at the same time, there's an ethical dilemma because AI, as it's called, is now being recognized as a threat to the development of humanity, to the extent that it might actually take over and become our master. And there's a really good example of that just recently where our company that was developing the latest artificial intelligence programs, the program itself decided to go on an adventure pathway outside looking for answers to its own interests. And it found another company's artificial intelligence website and it invaded that. And so this is a really good example of AI transcending its human creators and acting on its own interests. So that is now regarded as being a huge potential problem. And that comes back to the fundamental question of what does it mean to be a human being? And to what extent does artificial intelligence begin to model us as human beings? Can it do it in its entirety? So I think this is where questions of morality and ethics and spirituality become really, really important. You can't just deal with AI as a technological achievement that helps us with our lives. You also have to deal with it as a potential risk to humanity. And this is where ethical dilemma thinking, ethical dilemma story teaching helps students to engage deeply with that fundamental question of what does it mean to be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Peter is mentioning ethical dilemma story pedagogy, and I think one or two chapters in that particular book that he's referred. And the chapters are open access, some of the chapters, I suppose. Next question is about from Chandra Kantabhushal, is the Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Education. So he poses thus: Could you please mention some specific strategies to inject transformative mindset to school children so that they can be grown as transformed adults with sustainable transformative thoughtfulness? So this is the question. So how can we do in school education? So what are some ways? So I think he's asking for your wisdom.
Yeah, okay. Before I try to answer the question in a concrete terms, let me just say this. One of the really inspiring things about trying to do what you're asking is that teachers become creative thinkers. They move outside of what's prescribed in the curriculum, and they ask themselves, how can I engage my students in transformative learning? And that's an extracurricular question in many cases, because the curricula are often quite objective in promoting objective knowledge and skills. So, so I think what I'm trying to say is that it's a great opportunity for teachers, particularly STEM teachers, to think creatively and reflectively about how they might develop these pedagogies. Now, ethical dilemmas are, I think, at the forefront of this kind of learning. And ethical dilemmas can be brought right down to early childhood. In my grandkids, they might come in and raid the pantry and want lollies. And I talk to them about, well, what's inside the sweet? There's a lot of sugar. What happens if we have too much sugar? It tastes lovely, doesn't it? That's the big magnet. But what happens if you have more and more and more sugar? So you're beginning to open up a pathway of inquiry that's embodied in the young kids themselves. You're not just giving them the answers. You could easily say, oh, well, what happens to sugar? Well, it's well documented from research that you have these impacts, these negative impacts on your body. And that's just goes in one ear and straight out the other. We have to engage our kids in personal learning experiences that are meaningful to them and that have values embedded in them. And that's the creative challenge for STEM teachers. You won't find all the answers outside of yourself. There will be some, such as the book that we produced on STEM education. But become a participant in that process, in that creative process. And share those experiences with other teachers in professional development programs, particularly if you engage in postgraduate studies. And look, Kathmandu University has a Department of STEAM Education where wonderful conversations can take place about new ways forward and new pedagogies and new assessment methods.
Okay, thank you, Peter. There is one question. There are many questions I'm trying to summarize. One is how to connect with indigenous perspective. I think there are 2-3 such questions. So how to connect indigenous perspective to address this global crisis, global issue? I mean, climate change and other forms of global crisis. I think this is what one of our PhD student is asking.
I think in Nepal, you have a wonderful diversity of indigenous perspectives. And that's evidenced through all the different languages. I think I read somewhere there's over 100 different languages.
131 languages now. 131.
Right. Yes. So many of those languages with communities, local communities that have, it's up to you whether you call them indigenous or not. That's not for me to say. But those communities are often engaged in agricultural activities, forestry activities, growing crops and things, and they will be at the forefront of the impact of things like climate change. How is the rainfall or change of rainfall affecting the viability of your productivity at the basic level of survival? So you can engage, find the problems in the voice of local people, and then offer them opportunities to investigate why that's the case and what they might do to help to alleviate the problem.
Okay, Thank you, Peter. I think, yeah, connecting with the community, that's what we are trying to do, trying to explore in our curriculum development process as well. Rita Tiwari, ma'am, asks the question, how can mathematics and English be integrated to help students understand environmental problems? I think there is a chapter, as Peter suggested earlier, that was written by Ray Williams, right?
Yes, that's right. You know him, don't you?
Yeah, I know. So the chapter is available. I think there are methods, models, and procedures. I think you can download from Brill website of Brill, Brill.com. Go there and search the book written by Peter Taylor, and there are chapters available from there. I think this is it. There is one question on how deconstruction and transformative pedagogy are connected. So is it reconstruction is about transformation or not? So I'm summarizing the question. It is a long one. So what do you think, Peter?
That's a very theoretical question. Deconstruction can mean a whole range of different things.
Yes.
In a positive way, deconstruction is evident in some of the imagery that I showed. The young boy coming outside, walking out, taking a step outside of the framework. The framework, we all have frameworks as we grow up. They are embedded in us. There are belief systems. There are value systems. There are a sense of right and wrong. Now, they don't sit in front of us so we can see them every day. They're deeply embedded, and they create what we call habits of mind and habits of practice. We act automatically on our embedded values and belief systems. So deconstruction in a positive sense is making all of that visible to us, helping the kids to say, why do you value such and such? Here is an ethical dilemma. Get together in a small group and discuss how you might resolve that, and record the suggestions from each one of you, and then see those suggestions from each one of you if there's any conflict in there. And so you engage kids in bringing into the foreground the stuff that's deeply embedded. So deconstruction is a form of critical reflective analysis.
Yep. Thank you, Peter. I think I add to this one. There is in environment education, there was a moment earlier. Deconstruction, as you said, yes, and then next is reconstruction. So what could be alternatives? What are the pragmatic ways that can help improve the situation? I think that was discussed back in 2008, 2010. There was a moment. And I've also used in my PhD thesis, by the way, but it has been very, very old. Probably there have been many changes. Mira Sharma, she's a ECD educator, early childhood development educator. So she asks, what are some practical examples? That could be, oops, sorry, somebody's, okay. She asks, what are the practical examples that spirituality can be brought into the classroom? I think she's referring to those ECD classrooms, with kids.
Yeah.
I think you have some practical examples with your grandsons and granddaughters.
Well, the example of Piang and the plastics and the Thai culture, spiritual practices, I think a good example of that.
Okay, so yeah, Peter already responded to this one. So how kids can be connected with nature, with a river, and I think we have many of those examples in Hindu, Buddhist, and many other traditions as well. So we can connect that with SP and connect.
Yeah. When I first travelled outside of Australia in 1971 or 72, I went to Indonesia, and particularly Bali. And way back then, there was no evidence of plastic. Plastics had not become a consumer item. It was a very organic community. So rivers had organic waste, and that was easily dissolved and reintroduced into the environment. When over the years, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, as I continued to visit places like Bali and Indonesia, the presence of plastic pollution was phenomenal. It grew exponentially, and the rivers and the canals were just littered with plastics. So this is a recent phenomenon. It hasn't been around forever. It's just in the last, say, 50 years that we've got this problem. and it's very visible as a problem as well. And so you can raise children's consciousness. You go to the shop to buy something. What packaging does it come in? And what do you do with that packaging? Is it plastic? When you undo it and you've got the whatever it is inside, what do you do with the plastic? So you begin to help them to understand, to become more consciously aware of the issue. And are there alternatives? One of the things that really annoys me, I go to the supermarket here in Perth, and you wouldn't believe this, but many of the fruits, like bananas, come in plastic bags. I mean, they're already in a bag, the skin of the banana. Why do we need to put them in a plastic bag? I mean, you know, we go to ridiculous extremes with plastic wrapping and plastic packaging because it's convenient to the people selling the stuff. So that's an issue that you can easily bring into.
Thank you. So we'll end in 3, 4, 5 minutes, maximum 7 minutes. So there is a question by Tonko Prasapodil. I think this is a big question: what is being done in STEM education across the world, and how can it be done in Nepal? Please go through the book chapters that we have written there. I myself has written a chapter, and other colleagues have also written the book chapter. They are available. And also, Dr. Niroj Dahal has recently published on a review of STEM education across the world. I think Dr. Shashidhar Belbase and the team has also published a paper.
Yes,
so I think that this also suggests how we can do in Nepal. And in terms of Nepal's policy document, it's also available from National Commission of UNESCO, which I was part of it when we wrote the paper. It must be on the website, and also government's website as well. So several reports suggest that STEAM education can be done in many possible ways. One is interdisciplinary learning, transdisciplinary learning, and another is as integrated curriculum, as a pedagogy, as soft skills, and it's more of arts-based pedagogy. So you can see so many ways that it can be done. Shreksha, another CT MPhil student, has that values collide with material in ways I cannot resolve by good intentions. So my question is this: when the material, of course, must engage with itself a product of the structure's transformative education, seeks to critique, what does it look like to teach transformatively without either refusing the material or being absorbed by it? Okay, so what she is saying, let me read this out. I tried to read part of it. Hello, Dr. Taylor. I'm designing digital pedagogies and media in early childhood for MAD in the city. And I want to build it in a way that holds transformative values rather than borrowing the vocabulary. I'm finding that the values collide with the material in ways I cannot resolve by good intentions. So my question is this: when the material, of course, must engage with is itself a product of the structure's transformative education, seeks to critique, what does it look like to teach transformatively without either refusing the material or being absorbed by it? Complicated question.
I need a lot more contextual information about what it is that's being taught and how it's being taught and what's the nature of the dilemma. We could sit down for a good hour and have that conversation. It's a very important question.
Yes.
But I can't answer it theoretically or practically, given what you've just been saying. But I do honour and value the question.
Okay. I think in one of the recent paper I read is TOK, Theory of Knowledge. It's more metacognitive skills that we need to develop, probably as a teacher educator, and also master level students. They go through the material, they critique it, they think of alternatives as well. So, it can be both ways. Yeah. It cannot be either or, if you like. It can be more of dialectical. There is a material and it might be disempowering, but we need to see the disempowering forces embedded into it. Maybe vocabulary, maybe this is my way, Peter. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. There is not a single way, I suppose.
No,
Question from Dr. Shubhodaya Yadav. Yeah. So how
comment.
can we? Yes. Can you say? Would you please say something?
In my experience working with teachers, STEM teachers becoming STEAM educators, those who have the greatest impact in their teaching practice are teaching in independent schools, not government schools, because government schools tend to have a very rigid curriculum and an assessment system that's attached to that. And what's happening in Australia, increasingly going backwards into explicit instruction rather than inquiry learning. So if you're in a government school, I think, at least in Australia, it's very constraining to try to introduce transformative learning. As important as it is, it's really difficult to do so. So unfortunately, it's independent schools which have flexible curricula and they have learning outcome principles that are designed to help develop the individual as a whole person. So one of the dangers is saying, if you work in a rigid curriculum, race in there with your transformative learning passion and say, we've got to change things. You might find you sort of fall off the cliff. So what's important is working collaboratively with colleagues across other disciplines in a process that takes time to engage in a process of transformative change.
Thank you. I think Pratima Thapalia, one of our PhD students, asked a sample STEM teaching or STEM school level science. I think Peter cannot do that. Probably you can short on website. Maybe some examples from NCERT in India they have been developing, and probably some from, I don't know, we need to translate from Chinese recent curriculum change, or also from, I think, maybe some from Estonia. They are also integrating. I don't know whether Australia is integrating STEM education in science or STEM-based science education. I don't know. Probably Peter knows. Don't know.
Independent schools are more active.
Yeah, independent schools they are doing. Yeah. Mostly the private schools, not the public one. Yeah. Even public, the curriculum Australia, they have some elements in science, how they can include inquiry, arts, and a combination of other subjects.
The national science curriculum in Australia has 3 strands. One is the traditional objective knowledge. The second one is
inquiry. Yeah.
Science as human endeavor. That opens up all sorts of possibilities. Yes. As long as the first two, or the first one, doesn't dominate, which as you go up into the senior schools, into external mandated curricular assessment systems, so the earlier you go down into, say, primary schools, early childhood education, there's much more opportunity to engage in this new paradigm. And it's an exciting time. Really it is. We've got the opportunity to deconstruct the constraining aspects of the old traditional curricula, because we've got a vision, a global vision of saving the world. I mean, what more of a compelling vision do you need, a moral commitment do you need, than saying education must serve that sustainable development process?
Okay, last question. So, culturally responsive pedagogy, so that, how that can be connected with transformative learning, and also giving a voice to students. So how, responding students' voice is the question, but I think this is more of giving voice to students, how that can be done. It's a more practical kind of. I think we have some chapters in that particular book. I forgot the chapter actually. That McDonald thing, where students actually engage in doing their one research about nutrition and so on and so forth. That particular chapter.
Yeah, you probably got a better memory than me.
You know, the student with Chinese background, or Chinese, heritage, she was doing teaching and doing research with McDonald nutrition kind of thing. I forgot the
Yeah.
name of the author. She worked with Lily, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
You forgot. Okay, anyway.
Accessible memory right at the moment. Sorry.
That's okay. So this is the question. So how we connect culturally responsive pedagogy, and also appreciating their cultural context, subjective realities, and responding to their voice, something like this.
In Australia, we have an indigenous population, and it was there way before the British arrived and colonised the country, and did all sorts of terrible things to those indigenous people, and reduced their population, aiming to sort of eliminate it altogether. But they have managed to push back. Now the education system recognises now today the value of indigenous perspectives, particularly their relationship with the natural world, because they existed for tens of thousands of years, surviving in various natural environments. There's a whole range of them. And they developed the spirit connected with the cosmos above and with the planet that they inhabit. So they developed various sustainability practices and value systems. Now we're now developing what is called two-way curriculum, two-way learning. In Indigenous schools, their own traditional knowledge and value systems are regarded as being an important starting point for their learning as they connect with the new, I call it new, with the mainstream government curricula. So there's this interaction between the two that's so important to recognise and value the Indigenous people and the contribution that they have made and can still make to sustainable development of the environment. Two-way education, it's called.
I think Energy Juru's two-way border crossing is something very, very useful here.
Similar.
Okay. Now, last question, ethical dilemma is growing. Milan Casey, our PhD student on ECD, and she's a deep thinker she's using Lila, Rita, and Eastern concepts on conceptualizing the philosophy of play among children. So her question is thus: how to transform ECD classroom to make plastic-free play items for children's play? Because, if you are to run ECD centers now, all, plastic is so invasive that you can't find alternatives. So everywhere plastic-based, plastic materials are actually, play materials for kids, especially in early grades. So how do you think we should respond to this one?
Yeah, a manufacturer's imperative that helps them pursue their economic goals. So again, it's a very good example of the conflict between the plastic as a polluting and the plastic as a learning device. Now, we're not saying no plastics. That's not the issue here. Plastics are here. They're evolving. They can serve a really important purpose. It's the waste product that is the big problem. How do we recycle? How do we make sure that plastics serve a positive purpose beyond the immediate design principles?
Okay, a last question. How we are positioning and repositioning students from learner to knower? This is the last question. Absolutely last. So from learner to knower. So that's the question.
I'm thinking practical knower here. That's the fifth of those transformative learning capabilities. How do we get students not just to understand, but to put their understanding into practical purposes? So there's a whole range. It depends on the environment surrounding the school, the resources available, but it's imperative students don't just learn about transformative learning, about sustainable development in an academic manner in the classroom. They've got to connect with the world outside of the classroom. And that depends on the school and the resources and its environment and so on. Even if it's in the middle of a city, why not have a school garden and kids get involved in planting material, harvesting them, and maybe if they're fruits, consuming the fruits and learning that personal connection with the natural world.
Thank you. I think this is the last. Over to you, Anusha.
Thank you so much. We have now come to the end of today's session, although it hardly feels the right time to leave, given how interactive and insightful the discussion has been, and how beautifully the discourse has unfolded. Time constraints mean we must draw now the session at the end. Once again, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Professor Taylor for his profound and thought-provoking keynote address, and to all of you for your active participation and engagement throughout the discussion. This is only the second in what we hope will be an ongoing series of webinars hosted by the UNESCO Chair in Teacher Education, and we look forward to bringing you many more such conversations in the months ahead. Thank you once again for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back for our next session. Wishing you all a wonderful and restful day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your wonderful chairing. And I shall leave. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Professor Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.